I was to go up on a stake and make a bet, she won the Pulitzer Prize for this scene. I've not read anything like it.
For the rest of the book, this is like in your head. Like
that was written for a book club to be like, oh my gosh, like, wow.
I thought that the plot did a good job of shedding a bit of light on women's health issues, but doing it in a, like, dare I say, Kristen Hanna, the women type of way.
Let's go beyond the first page. Let's go beyond the first page.
Welcome back, Second Pagers. This is Beyond the First Page podcast with siblings Phoebe, Phil, and Isaac. I'm Phoebe.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Isaac.
And this is Club Meeting 29, Night Watch by Jayne Anne Phillips. And as a reminder, and as always, this is a book club style podcast. So we will be talking about major plot points and spoilers from throughout the book. And so if you don't want Night Watch to get ruined for you, really recommend that you read the book and then come on and listen to the discussion. And hopefully we are able to give you some insights and some things that we thought were interesting about Night Watch. Also, if you like this podcast, please follow us on social media, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And also, if you enjoy the episode, please give us a 5-star review. And to start us off, we are going to do a thing that we normally always do, which is some sort of icebreaker to get us into talking about Night Watch. And this is not specific to Night Watch at all. However, I will say one of the joys, and I hope that Phil and Isaac would echo this, one of the joys of doing any kind of venture with your siblings is they're people that you can be pretty honest with. And so I think we're getting to the point in our venture on the podcast where we're feeling even more open and honest than ever with each other. And so I thought it would be funny and hopefully not too hurtful if we do a little, not a roast, but a kind of a podcast superlative, but make it a little funny.
Okay, so prior to the podcast recording, that's what we have to say.
Or just like on the podcast, like while the podcast is being recorded, like, or in our planning sessions.
I think I have mine. For
okay,
Phoebe.
About me.
Yeah, let me think.
Well, I thought it'd be funny if the two of you said the same thing, so we counted down and heard what you said.
We can try. We're not going to say the same thing, but we can try. In my opinion about you. Isaac, do you have yours?
Yeah.
Feels like yours is deep-seated and mean, Phoebe.
3, 2, 1. Make us have the perfect
charger?
camera. That's
fair. Do not disturb.
Make us have the perfect camera and then never post a video online. Just keep them for yourself.
So it was to keep you guys in line. That's your biggest pet peeve. I thought you guys were for sure going to say, like, never finishes the book on time.
Oh, I mean, that's like, just a little too true.
I just base mine off of yours, and then we're always finished. I just wait to see when you say it.
Okay. Well, that didn't work as good as I thought. That is true,
but I think Phoebe is very... Let's record by Wednesday. Wednesday comes around. Okay, so I'm going to start the book this afternoon. And then also just like literally never getting it right. Whereas like, she's like, I'll be done in 2 hours. Like, just like telling, and I'm just like, why, if we just gave you the last week to finish the book and you just started today, like, it is physically impossible for you to read this book in 2 hours. Time
is just a social construct. Okay, let's do Isaac next. Or do you have Isaac still? Isaac is hard to make fun of, but there is one very obvious one to me that I think
the obvious
we could all say.
But it's less Isaac and more like Isaac's technology.
Yeah. Yeah, so Isaac's technology never freaking works. Even during the phone call, his phone is cutting out.
It's just like, where do you live, dude? He's like, I'm charging it.
Yeah, I'm like, you can still talk while your phone is charged.
No, it blocks the speaker if it's charged.
Only on your phone?
Yeah. I only ever talk on speakerphone, though. or with my AirPods in. Like I'm never like holding my phone to my head. So if it's charged in and I don't have my
Same.
AirPods, it's on speaker and the thing is blocking the speaker.
But literally same, and no one has ever told me that I cut out for half of the conversation.
That's the thing. It's not like a muffle. Like when I am on my speakers and the wind is blowing, it's like the
Oh,
like that's understandable.
That's yours.
But that's understandable. Like at least physically that makes sense. You just cut out for 5 seconds and then you're back. Like your explanation does not justify that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Phil just gave his own away because I think
One
Isaac
of
and I
many.
can both agree.
One of
Yeah.
many. I was honestly like, what are you gonna say?
The biggest one, I think, and Isaac and I have already laughed about this, is, and we've laughed with you, Phil, like you'll say, okay, I can meet at 11:23, and then Isaac and I are there and you're not there. And then you answer and you're riding your bike.
yeah. You're like, I can only meet now. We really need to meet and discuss this. Oh, but I'm going to be riding my bike backwards, also listening to a lecture.
No,
I just think
I
it's a
do.
timing
It's so
thing.
bad. It's the timing is really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well-
just so you know, Phoebe, that was very fun, but that was more of just like an inappropriate ragging on each other. Superlatives would be
So-
like Isaac, best smile on the podcast. Phil, most likely to miss his own meeting. Phoebe, is everything perfect before we start? The perfection.
Notice how Isaac's was very positive and then ours were negative.
Ours were still
smile,
negative.
Best smile on the podcast. Okay, yeah, you guys.
Phoebe is a nag. Okay, well, let's do that. That's a great point, Isaac. And we should always have positivity, which is similar to our theme of this podcast today, too, bring a good and bad. So we should definitely bring a good as well. And so
Next
I
week.
will say for feels like not now. Yeah, we could do. No, let me just say mine about you two, and then we can move on. I think,
Okay.
Phil, most insightful comments. I mean, you always bring something that makes Isaac and I think. And I think, Isaac, you bring a necessary like levity and chill to the podcast that is always needed. And you're like you have the very like down to earth comment. So
And Phoebe, you are the boss woman. I mean, you are. So we wouldn't be
Still
here
the
without.
nag.
We wouldn't be here without you, though. That's the thing.
Yeah,
So,
no, a lot of
Yeah.
force behind where we are, and you
Yeah.
drive the conversation. So
Thanks, guys. Yeah. So good reminder, Isaac. I think it's always good to be able to like be honest with each other in both positive and negative. So it really felt like it came to a head this week with all the funny little isms that we have. And so I thought we should share with the listeners. But let's take it away with Night Watch in 60 seconds, Isaac.
okay, and just as a forewarn here, kind of difficult to summarize in 60 seconds. As we get into it, we may discuss why, but I've done my best here. So in Night Watch by Jayne Anne Phillips, the reader follows several character points of view on a variety of timelines. We follow Connolly, the main character, who's a 12-year-old girl that has been caring for her mother and younger siblings for the past couple years after a man called Papa has come to their homestead in the mountains of West Virginia. He has abused her mother and upended all their lives. Papa's abuse has seemingly driven Connolly's mother, Eliza, mad, leaving to Connolly's necessity to be the caretaker of the family. We follow a character only referred to as the sharpshooter, but the reader is given context that he is Eliza's husband and Connolly's father, who joins the Union at the start of the Civil War, but is grievously injured and loses his memory, waking up in a field hospital knowing nothing of his past, including even his own name. We follow Dervla, a descendant of indentured servants who raised the sharpshooter as a boy and cared for Eliza, who was the daughter of the plantation owner where she worked. Dervla ran away with Eliza and her ward, the sharpshooter, after they fell in forbidden love as kids and when attacked in an attempt to separate them, killing the plantation workers sent to harm them. Jumping back to the present day, Papa has brought Eliza and Connolly to an asylum so that he no longer has to be burdened by them. In the asylum, Connolly begins to work as a nurse, and her mother, called Miss Janet to make her seem more sophisticated, begins to improve. Miss Janet eventually begins to form a relationship with the doctor of the asylum, but she has finally realized that the Night Watch, a sort of guard position, is her husband, the sharpshooter, who they all thought had been lost in the war. Eliza and her husband are going to tell the doctor of the asylum when Papa shows back up, crazed, and tries to kill Eliza, but her newly found husband saves her.
Okay. Just listening to that, I'm like, what the heck is this book?
It's a difficult one. There was a lot of
No,
jumping
it was
around. It's not.
that was a good summary,
Yeah.
Isaac. I think that was exactly what this book was, and I think it leads perfectly into our discussion because this did win the 2024 Pulitzer Prize, and it so obviously, you know, it's ranked among one of the best books published in 2024 in America. That's what that is signifying. And it's interesting because I think there's merits to it for sure, but there is also, it leaves us to question as the reader, why was this considered such a good book? And so for today's episode, we want to do a full book analysis of an overall analysis of this. So the writing style, the plot, and the characters, and bring both good and bad examples from each. I think diving into these three elements and bringing to light things that the three of us enjoyed and didn't enjoy to each other could help you also as listeners of discerning whether, you know, you thought that this was worthy of the Pulitzer Prize, and also kind of shedding light on why we picked it as a book on this podcast too. I mean, obviously we picked it because it won the Pulitzer, but I will just say candidly, I read it before and I recommended it to the three of us to read because my initial reaction upon finishing this book was to text my mom, my aunts, and say, you should read this book. So while we'll get into the rankings later and that might be confusing to you too, and also our listeners, I think there is a demographic that this book definitely speaks to. And I think we'll all three bring to light some of the things that would speak to that demographic, and then some of the things that we had hesitation with. So let's talk about plot first. That was a long-winded way to say let's talk about plot first. Isaac already kind of revealed the convoluted plot, but I wanted to ask you guys to it felt very obvious to me the second time reading it, but the first time I was really trying to figure out what was going on. And I'm wondering if you two kind of immediately figured out the situation, like that the Night Watch was obviously her husband. Like, were you confused at all about the Papa character? Just teeing off the plot conversation with that, I guess.
I think I was not. So I was trying to again think of why this won the Pulitzer Prize. And I was not, but I was thinking maybe it's because I don't really read books like this. I usually read fiction and fantasy. And as we've talked about on our podcast a while ago, I think it was on the Natural History of Dragons podcast, what do we expect in a fantasy? We expect a twist. And so this was like the most unremarkable twist. I don't look for twists. Saw this coming from a mile away that he was the Night Watch, that
He was
this
obviously
character
her
was.
husband.
Yeah, I mean, like,
right.
she named the book The Night Watch. Like, that was maybe not the best idea ever, I will say. I think I would have been a bit more surprised if the book's name wasn't that. But yeah, I wasn't too confused. I was confused about Darlia, or I'm sorry,
Dervla.
But
spelled, by the way, Dearbhla.
Yeah,
Derbla.
Derbla.
Oh, Derbla. I thought it was Dervla.
As did I.
No, yeah, Derbla.
So Derbla. I don't think that was a plot thing. I think that, and we'll get to this in the character analysis, I just think she was an unnecessary character completely. So I think I was more confused. I thought she was...
Which there was a few unnecessary characters.
For sure. And I thought that maybe I was confused about her point in the story because I thought I was missing something, and then I went back and I was not. So yeah.
Yeah. So what, I guess then, or go ahead, Isaac, because were you surprised? That's just like kind of an initial reaction. Then we'll get into like the good and bad of the plot.
No, but it is interesting, Phoebe, because I was talking to a couple other fans and they expressed their surprise of the twist and were like, "Oh, the Night Watch was the husband." I was like, "That didn't surprise." Yeah, like they named him O'Shea, and you learned 3/4 of the book before that this guy's new name was O'Shea. There was no there was no like surprise from it. So
I'm only calling it a twist because I read the words like in reading the review for this, they called it a twist, and I was like, okay,
This is
like I
not a
guess that
twist.
I guess we
Yeah.
didn't see that
I
coming.
think the papa, like right at the beginning, though, you're trying to figure things out. I will say,
No,
but
the
very
first
quickly,
the first chapter, Phoebe, 100% is very confusing.
Yeah.
and then like the sharp flip to the sharpshooter,
But
and then
you're
Papa,
never-
like you think is obviously her dad, and then you find out quickly it's not her
Yeah,
dad.
but that's like in the first 2 chapters. You're never unaware
Yeah.
that the sharpshooter is not the father of Connolly and the husband of
Right.
Eliza. Like that is stated out.
From the
I thought there
obvious.
was going to
Yeah.
be, if we're talking about like potential twists and stuff, like he was black, the sharpshooter.
Right.
I thought
Yeah.
that was going to be like the whole part of it. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that it never went there. Like this wasn't a racial story.
Yes, this was not a story about
I'm
race.
yeah,
I mean,
I'm pleasantly
only
surprised because
only
it's a
his
white woman
service.
writing it. That was like I'm sick of reading about
Oh,
race
yeah.
from
No,
a
that's what I'm
white
saying.
point of view.
It's-
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
talked about this on the RJ Barker podcast. Like that wasn't her story to tell. So she
Yeah.
didn't tell it. And I am very thankful that she didn't. But
That she
that
didn't.
was like where I thought the twist was going to be. And maybe that was the point of that like thread of the story, was to get this reader to be, anticipating that. And then whatever twist she was trying to put was supposed to be more surprising. But to me, there was no surprise.
Overall.
Yeah, as far as like the plot goes.
Yeah, so the plot was really, I mean, let's talk about what's good and bad about the plot. I think we've established really there was no, like, twist is a very strong word. You were kind of trying to figure things out right at the beginning as the reader, which is like basically any fictional book which you have not read before. So no real twist there. But I think, and the reason that I recommended this book was because I thought that the plot did a good job of talking about the chaos post the Civil War and about women's, and shedding a bit of light on women's health issues, but doing it in a, like, dare I say, Kristen Hanna, the women type of way, where it's from a very fictional, very approachable story of her being institutional or being in a mental institution. And, you meet other characters, you meet the nurses, you get kind of snippets from the real doctor who wrote about being a doctor in an insane asylum. And you see, characters like the woman that Miss Janet would go on walks with, who just basically pretended to be insane so that she could stay away from her family. That was what I got from that. So I think that part of the plot, and this was a very contentious point on our pre-discussion, but I will say on the Pulitzer Prize website page, the category for fiction says must be published in America first, and is by an American author, preferably dealing with American life. So that's kind of the criteria. That's all they give, is a very vague criteria of who can win the Pulitzer Prize. And so I think in this case, the plot does lend to that. However, and I'm sure you two will bring this up too, like something like A Demon Copperhead, which won the Pulitzer last year, is talking about very relevant American life issues today that I think just resonate way more with the reader. And that could be the writing, and that could be like the way the message was portrayed. But I just think this was to me, it wasn't giving the level that would win any kind of like distinguished award at a countrywide level. And I'll pause there for you guys to give your thoughts or give your good and bad of the plot.
Yeah, so Phoebe, I agree with you. I also am to give the part of the good plot leading into the Americana part of this award. And I think that this is something that, like, this is a subject matter in a time period that is, I think, probably very infrequently written and talked about. Post Civil War, with a just like quote unquote normal white American family in the Union is like a unique setting for a story, especially in that time period, because like I'm trying to think of the other books that we've read. Beloved was kind of this time period, but it was post Civil War with like now these freed slaves. I think this was the time period of Beloved.
Yeah.
And that's like an obvious like community to write about and tell a story about. Whereas this
Right.
white Appalachia, yet West Virginia is not really talked about really much at all. Kind of odd that Demon Copperhead won it last year, which is
Well, so
also
you're
the
talking
same.
this through. I know. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, Beloved has these themes and so like, did this woman just write this book thinking she was going to win a Pulitzer Prize? That's neither here nor there. Sorry, go ahead.
So kind of unique that they're like 2 years in a row, a Pulitzer Prize is being represented by this kind of area, I guess. But I just thought that was it being post Civil War, a white family, you know, it was post Civil War, not really a racial story. Kind of made it unique, which I think aided in the plot and we kind of talked about, she didn't try to make it a racial story. This was a story about a lot of other different problems
right.
that I think I didn't really get the women's health representation. I'm not sure if maybe that was just overlooked for me. I was talking more of just the problems of like everyday life, and there was like a very graphic rape and abuse scenes that she didn't shy away from, which we can talk more about, which I think also aided into this possibly winning the award. But that is the kind of the good things I thought were about the plot. She took something that is not really ever written about and kind of dove in like pretty deep.
What about the bad?
So the bad, I think the main problem I had, the main hole in the plot I had was it seemed like she was grasping at this theme of identity or, again, it's kind of weird because we just read James, but there was this whole thing about not revealing the dad's name, the sharpshooter's name. And there was all these lines about having to claim the name. He joined the Union Army to get his name back. And then his name was like, I don't even remember his name.
It was like insignificant.
It was
at the
like
end.
John Connolly.
Connolly.
So the
No, it
girls,
was Ephraim Connolly.
Ephraim Connolly. Yeah. So the girl's name was Connolly. And I guess I don't get that. Like what was the significance
What
of
was the
hiding the
significance?
name?
Yeah.
What was the, you know, she never gets around to that. It was just like this kind of like building and like moving around this whole idea of him claiming his name and her not knowing the name that like didn't really mean anything.
Yeah. Good point.
So that was my biggest problem with it.
Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much about the pros, but I do completely agree with you guys, and I do think that shouldn't be understated. The other thing that's unique, I think, about this story is you hear a lot about Reconstruction from the Southern point of view. You hear a lot about it from the Northern point of view. There were a couple of really interesting states that Maryland was a slaveholding state in the Union, where Virginia, like Northern Virginia, had a lot of people that were pretty split. West Virginia and the border states were also just very torn. And I think that that's a story that you don't hear a lot about, that it was in Alabama, you could trust your neighbor was also a Confederate. In
Right.
New York, you could trust that your neighbor was also in the Union. But in West Virginia, they were all sort of mixed up. And I think that that's an interesting thing. So I don't want to harp on that too much because you guys already said it well. The bad, again, I don't think I'm
Phil's
going to...
like, where do I start?
Well, no, I just actually don't think I'm going to add too much new. I think that there's so much leakage into the writing and the characters that are like, that then, as Isaac said, sort of make the plot, like, what are you doing with this? Like the
Right.
writing and characters. And so I'd rather probably save time for those because I think that those it would be
Yeah,
easier
go into
explained
it,
from
Phil.
that lens. Yeah, so
Go into it.
I'll go the characters first. I actually thought one of the only good characters was a pretty minor character and was the surgeon, the story character. I thought that character was hit. Both him and Eliza, the mother, were both well written
Yeah,
characters, and I think
agreed.
that they were the best, and they actually have a relationship. And I think that those two characters both had depth. They were understandable. I think Dr. Story was very understanding and was sort of a little bit of a rock in a sea of very turbulent characters, because it sort of seemed like her characters were getting away from each other, because as Isaac was sort of saying with the plot, like she had to tie a bow on it in the end, and it was just like, what are you doing here? And so it did
Yeah.
seem that those two stayed very manageable and were a little bit more well done. I
Yeah,
think
I thought the doctor's story was believable. To give a specific example, was believable because he started a relationship with Miss Janet, who ends up being Eliza Connolly's mom. Like, they're the same person, obviously, but she goes by Miss Janet. But it comes out that he had relationships with, or his uncle had relationships with previous patients, who was
yeah.
then married to a patient, and then he had inappropriate relationships with married women. So it was like very believable that he would enter into a relationship with an insane married woman.
Yeah, and I think that
Yeah.
she was also just like supportable, I guess, as a character. You
For
were rooting
sure.
for her. She was obviously went through it. And I think that the bad was just the number of characters. I don't know why every single book I read seems to feel that and we talked about this on the RJ Parker, you don't have to write a book from multi-character point of view.
Yeah.
This book should have been written by Connolly. Why did we go from Weed? I was so
Great
frustrated
point.
reading that
Oh,
chapter.
God.
That was the
Yeah.
stupidest thing. That was written for a book club to be like, oh my gosh, like, wow. Just look at this.
That was written to win a Pulitzer
Yeah,
Prize,
like
I
it
would
was
argue.
so.
Like, they were trying. She was trying
It
so
was
hard.
so trying so hard is the correct, and it was so unnecessary. And
Yeah.
I'm
No value added.
surprised. Yes,
No
and
value added.
the Dervla character was the exact same thing. I don't think your book is made richer by introducing many characters, and especially if you're not going to write like a 7-book fantasy series where you're going to build a world. Stop. Like 3 characters can tell a story. Like, and it can be from one of the characters' points of view. Like this.
Well, and I
This
think
could have been.
if she had done Connolly, I think all of what we said earlier would have been eliminated, right? Like,
Yeah.
you would have gotten the surprise because she would not have picked up on what was going on with her parents. You would have been able to tell a story truly from a woman's point of view about that time, which I think, again, like we said about the plot, lends to its uniqueness as a story. So a woman during that time period, like, it is hard to get any account of a woman like, women couldn't read and write at certain points in history. So it's hard to get accounts from women. So that's another plus for it. You get a relationship between a mother and a daughter, and both of them are healing from that very abusive situation that they were in. So that is going to lend depth to the story. I completely agree, Phil.
And
Had you had a one point of view, this would have been a completely different book.
yeah, and I think just to expand on that a little bit, and then we'll turn it over to you, Isaac. The last thing, I actually would argue that the John O'Shea, which was the only one that Connolly couldn't have told because she wasn't there and was not completely irrelevant, had no idea, like, was not value adding to the literature at all. You've read so many stories about warriors getting better in the hospital. Like, that's not like a new narrative that we've never seen before. She didn't write it in a unique way. It wasn't particularly well done, and it would have been more interesting to Connolly and us as readers if we didn't know everything. If
Right.
we were like,
For
why
sure.
is this night watchman so scarred? Like, what is up with this guy? Instead of being spoon fed his trauma.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. It's I think I agree with everything. The good thing I thought the Papa character was very hateful and she wrote that very well. Obviously, that's
I agree with
good.
you. I think that was another character that was believable.
I don't know if he was necessarily believable. I think at the end of him going crazy and going back to the psychiatric hospital, sort of things
That
were
ruined
becoming
it.
But this whole
Yeah.
idea of just like a Southern or Confederate soldier runaway that goes and takes advantage of women in the mountains because he can, I think is, again, sheds light, Phoebe, to what you were talking about, like the risks that the women in this time period were probably like
Facing.
and hardships that they were having to face.
Right.
I didn't have a problem with the Dervla character in the sense of being kind of the maternal glue of the family. I think a lot of families have that. And especially with her background of having this kind of grit to get them all through that. I didn't have a problem with that. I did have a problem when, like, why are all these Appalachian Southern women being given these magical powers?
I will say I was reading kind of like, why did this win the Pulitzer, diving into these blog posts, and somebody did say that the like Connolly's premonitions were like trauma episodes that she was having because she experienced all of this trauma
Yeah,
from
I
dealing
didn't have
with
a problem
Papa.
with that.
Yeah.
It
I
was
had
more
the
the
problem
But I
Dervla
didn't see that
character.
connection. Like I think that's like people just trying to give Jayne Anne Phillips the benefit of the doubt. I don't think that's what I think Jayne Anne Phillips was speaking as if Connolly also had these powers.
Oh, I didn't
But
read it
who
that
knows?
way. I read it as she had taken her mother into this psychiatric hospital,
Asylum.
and her mother is now getting better, and she has this man who she knows is out there, like still haunting her. And
Yeah,
it's
I
Okay,
like
so
I
some
you
took the
read
traumatic
that.
psychiatric
breakdown.
episodes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good character analysis. I had the exact same thing as you. Miss Janet was the only good character. I said all others were bad except maybe Dr. Story. So,
Nice.
yeah, and I agree that the Papa character at the beginning was definitely a necessary villain. At the end, it got a little far fetched, but and again, we all mentioned the rape scene, obviously very horrific, and that the writing was a huge part of that, and so I didn't personally want to talk about that writing, but
That
so
was
I'll let
my
one of you two.
highlight.
That
of
was
the
my
writing.
highlight as well. I think
Yeah.
that
Okay.
that was the
Yeah.
people say Tom Hanks in 1994 won the Oscar for this one scene in Philadelphia that he's like, it's the music is playing, he's in like the apartment loft and he's just like drinking. And same thing with like Leo in the bear one where he's just like outside. It's like for one scene. If I was to go up on a stake and make a bet, she won the Pulitzer Prize for this scene. I've not read
Mhm.
anything like it. It was traumatic. It was violent. It was like more than Toni Morrison's sexual depiction of that, which I think was also, we've discussed, is very horrific.
Right.
I do think that this was a one of a kind scene in horrible ways, but just very. I mean, I don't want to use any positive words about
Yeah.
this, but it was
This
Right.
feels weird.
well
Yeah.
done.
Right.
But I don't know how to say that without saying this was a good part of the book. Like it was not
Right.
good.
Yeah.
You
It
don't
gave
want to be
me
reading it.
it gave me shivers, and I guess that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It made you want to almost just be like, okay, I know what this is. I'm just going to skip to
Right.
ahead.
Yeah.
And it's weird to be like complimenting a writing for such like a horrific, like part of the book that really, I think, and I agree with you, Phil. I think this won it as well. Because for the rest of the book, this is like in your head. Like this happens pretty early on, and this is in your
Right.
mind the rest of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you guys totally, but I did want to highlight for the listeners, because we were talking about this, the parts that were completely unnecessary with characters. But I think the writing was good, but again, it was so artful that it was almost feeling like it was trying too hard. It was like the part in Beloved that Isaac that really did not resonate with you, when it was kind of goes into like a poem, and it was just, you're just kind of lost for what the point is. And so this is the part with Weed. I'll just read you a little excerpt. He digs, digs, digs with his round lead spoon, digging with hands and heels down where the dirt feels cool. Back at the shadowed barn when they're all at chores. Dig every day, the shape scooped out like a slipper his size. The loamy smell and dark grit taste, the dirt sifted, pulled, and grabbed. And it again, you just, there's no point to this character. And there's no
It's
point. Like, what is
weird
that
when
saying?
people it's weird when people write illiterate characters as if they don't speak either. No one, just
Yeah.
because you can't read doesn't mean you don't think
You're
in
thinking that
sentences.
way.
Yeah, like what?
Yeah.
Like that's so dumb. He was not written with any mental handicap. He just was a sort of a
Unlearned
An odd
uneducated
duck.
person. Yeah, he just didn't go to
Yeah.
school. And
Yeah.
so weird. I think
So I think that's poetic sounding. Like when I'm reading it, there is some poeticism to that. And we're not writing experts, so I don't even know what to call that. But it's just, it feels like it's just,
stream
again,
of
trying so
consciousness
hard.
that's unnecessary. Yeah.
Yeah. But I wanted to give that as an example of kind of our frustration a little bit, so people understand where we're coming from.
Yeah,
Hopefully that did a
was
good job.
well said, Phoebe. I do want to say one more positive thing. I think she gave a cool way of introducing the setting with the quotes at the beginning. I think on the audiobook sometimes it was a little tedious because you read like every single word of that, but I do think that that's like an interesting way. And I don't think it was well done in whole, because I think then she over explained it in the actual writing. But I think would she have let the gender disparities of the night asylum just have shown in the pay stub? That would have been very cool. That was, I think, a very interesting part of the story where you hear she basically, just to explain, she lists out all of the pay of every single person that works at an asylum. And what I thought was cool about that was, first of all, we don't know anything about asylums. So it gives us a granular idea of a little bit better of the setting of where these people are. And basically the staff of that, they were all doing the same job, but the women's pay was just about 60% of the men's pay. It was literally the exact same title, and they were all getting just like less pay, and all of the women's jobs were just less valued. And I thought that that was interesting because you did see this interaction and this power play, as we saw, between Dr. Story and the nurse and his patients. And I thought that was an interesting way to tell the story. It was then over-explained in the rest of the narrative. I thought the quotes about
the masturbation.
That was very funny.
No, I liked those tidbits too. I agree with you though, Phil. Had it been done more artfully, they would have been even better. But yeah, again, just she did it in a way where it wasn't value added at the end of the day, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that really wraps up our analysis. I mean, I think that was, you guys both brought things that I hadn't thought of. And I hope, though, that you still see kind of where I was coming from with recommending this book to the podcast. And maybe we see why it won the Pulitzer. I'm unconvinced. I remain unconvinced at the end of this. But I hope that you guys see why I thought we should do it for the podcast.
I think that if you were to read one book a year and this was the book that you chose, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, you did the worst. I wouldn't be like, why would you, like, I would be like, you definitely could have done better. But it wasn't like there was nothing irredeemable. I think that the rape scene was something I've never read about, as we talked about. And the plot is just really under talked about. So I don't think, again, like you could pull merits out of this book. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So we won't trust me in the next few, though. It sounds like.
I mean, the Pulitzer Committee agreed with you, Phoebe. So
Yeah, true. There must be something to it. And again, like this is a great time to say we are not book critics. We are not professionals in any way. Like none of us have degrees, as the listeners surely know by this point, in any type of literature or anything to do with writing. But
Yeah,
this is just three average Joe's opinions.
This is a book
on
club,
things.
and we're discussing books. We're not, the authority on what makes it good or not. I think we've said it many a time. It's like if you get something out of a book, then that is what you've gotten as a benefit to you. Yeah.
We are the Rotten Tomatoes to the Academy Awards.
Yeah. And with all that being said, let's rate the book because we'll be a little hypocritical then. No, but I gave it a 4. I think it was good, not great. I have recommended it to people. The writing wasn't bad. I got stuff from it. And so, yeah, I'm a easy grader though, when it comes to a 5 scale. A 3 scale is definitely different, but 4 for me.
I'm a 3. I thought this book was exactly average. Good things, bad things.
Yeah. Isaac? I'm giving it a 3 as well. I was giving myself some leeway. Yeah, I was giving myself some leeway in attempt that maybe as we discussed it, the good points that were brought up by you guys brought me to a 4. I was hoping that would happen. It did not.
It did not.
Great discussion. Right. It didn't help the book rating though.
Yeah, I think a book that you would really enjoy if you were looking for the women's like mental health during this time period, or a time period in history, I would really recommend 1,000 White Women. It's by Jim Fergus, and I've recommended this before on the podcast because I recommended this book, Night Watch, before and gave it as kind of a comparison. This is from the journal. These are excerpts from the Journal of May Dodd, and it is about white women being sold, white women who were in psychiatric institutions being sold to Native Americans as wives. And it's very interesting, and it's, based on accounts that she wrote about. So it's real accounts of these women's lives. And so that would be my recommendation. Phil, what about you?
Yeah, I am definitely not well read in this genre. I would say 2 that I really liked, that they're very different, but they deal with similar themes. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say you would like them. One is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, about a woman with postpartum depression. And I think that it's similar to what was probably going on in Miss Janet's mind, and because the people around her are just like not helpful. It's good, and it's short too.
And we've talked about on the podcast before.
And we have
Dead Week.
Yeah. The second one that I would recommend is Woman in the Window by A.J. Flynn, and it's very similar to any like Frida McFadden one. I think it's better than anything Frida McFadden has done, but people will disagree with that. But that's similar to that. So those are my 2.
Nice. Isaac, what about you?
I would recommend Trust by Hernan Diaz. It actually won the Pulitzer alongside Demon Copperhead for 2023 in fiction. And it is, if you like this one, you're really going to like Trust. That's how I would say.
You didn't like it, Isaac. You didn't like it.
No, I really liked it.
Yeah. It's just a Pulitzer winner. If you like Pulitzer winners.
If you liked Night Watch, if you were liking Night Watch, you're really going to like Trust.
You're really going to like, because it's so much better. Okay. I see.
There is, uniquely enough, there is an element of women's psychiatric care in it as well, but an awesome story.
I can
actually has a cool twist at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really good.
Last year's Pulitzers were heavy hitters, it sounds like.
Yeah. Last year's Pulitzers were very good.
I read Wednesday's Child, which was the runner-up for the Pulitzer this year. And Phil, you read Same Bed, Different Dreams, and you said that was phenomenal.
Yeah, I've heard bad things about the Wednesday's Child. Very depressing.
Child, I would say Wednesday's Child was better than Night Watch, though. Like,
Yeah.
I think that either of those maybe should have won over Night Watch. It was all about Asian American women emigrating to America and like elements of depression, loss. Very dark, but very well written. And I cried in it, and I did not cry in Night Watch. Like, it really touched me personally. So
Yeah, I thought the Same Bed, Different Dreams, yeah, phenomenal. The other one I will say that I know was big was Anne Pratchett's Tom Lake. A lot of people thought that would win.
that's interesting.
I liked this better than that, actually. So
I think this was more deserving of the Pulitzer than Tom Lake was.
I believe that as well. But
yeah.
Anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
A lot of books
Yes.
were written in 2024.
Yeah.
Yes, and now we're on to 2025, and we are here to introduce you to all the good ones. So, Isaac, this book was not written in 2025, but we are still going to read it because the, I believe, third book in this series is coming out in 2025. So we're going to read the first one. Would you tell us a little bit about what the book is that we are reading next time on the podcast?
So we'll be reading and discussing The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. And a quick summary of that. Probably butchering this. Tau Tarfi is a young man from the Omihi people who are locked in a seemingly unwinnable war where only a select few are born with magical abilities to summon dragons or transform into powerful warriors. Tau, lacking such gifts, seeks a peaceful life, but is driven to a path of violent revenge after his family is brutally murdered, dedicating himself to become the greatest swordsman to exact justice against those who wronged him, even if it means sacrificing everything.
Phil, were those pronunciations right?
Tao is right. I forget the people. It's fine. I mean, it's a fantasy book, so I'm guessing, as RJ's told us, like the narrator picks his own pronunciations too. I love this book. I read this. The newest one is coming out in 2025. Highly anticipated. This book is phenomenal. Nothing short. So I'll be surprised if it doesn't get at least 4 stars from both of you, but we'll see.
All right. Yeah.
Excited.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
And I will say, too, we are trying to get more engagement with our listeners. And so if we miss something that you really want us to talk about Night Watch, leave a comment on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, whatever medium you're using to listen to us yap about books. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. And again, like we said, we are in no way experts about writing or reading. And so would love to hear what you guys thought about Night Watch, if you thought it was deserving of the Pulitzer, if there's things that you hated, liked, that we didn't mention, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you guys. And as always, this is your bi-weekly reminder to call someone that you love, tell them about a good book that you've recently read, go to your local library or use your Libby app, and until we talk again, stay classy, second pagers. We'll see you later.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Let's go beyond the first page.